leakages, leaks, you know, fuel, oil, coolant, that sort of stuff, you know, which can come from multiple sources. And sometimes it's just a matter of saying, hey, are you aware of that? And did you notice that? And it might be a case of like, yeah, well, you need to monitor that, or, you know, if it doesn't pass muster, you say, well, you need to talk to the workshop breakdown phone and get them to fix it, or get them to assess it. You know, and this is a message that I always give in training over the years is, like, we pay people as supervisors to make decisions, right? So rather than you making the decision and then when it's a stuff up, it's on your head, always pumping it up the line, and then it's out of your hands, no matter what happens. The shit's not going to rain down on you. Yeah, and people get that message, and after a while, you know, so when they're out on the road and they think, oh, there's something not right here, you know, they'll pull up and ring the supervisor, and that's exactly what you want. You don't have to do it all the time, but you know, that's a much better outcome than a scenario. Oh, well, I'll just wing it. You know, we've seen some pretty big disasters there. So, a couple of other things, stuff like hoses, like this is a sort of the old Fesco's, you know, and that being sits right on there, right? So that's been done pretty well. But see all those joiners there? That's because it's dropped down between the chassis and the drive, right? Really simple thing, you know. And sometimes we see where the keeper up here on the hydraulic hose will break, and the same thing happening. It's to drop down here for a few minutes while they're tuning, and that's it. Your hoses are stuffed, you know. And apart from the cost, it's the bloody inconvenience. You know, if that happens going into the mine site, they can't open the lids, they can't load, you know, big drama. Yep, so all that sort of stuff. They're carrying a drum of coolant, good on them, and they've got it well restrained. But a lot of times they don't have it well restrained, which is potentially a problem. So things like fire extinguisher, you know, our guys do a pretty good job in the workshop of maintaining that and making sure it's in date. Normally they write on the bag, you know, when it expires, right? But if that can't be seen easily, it's incumbent on the person doing the pre-start to make sure it's in date, because I can assure you that the mine safety people do check. Yeah. They definitely do. And so the other thing that we want when we're doing all this is when we see something that's starting to wear out, so that we can alert the workshop, you know, so that they go, oh, you know, we're going to have to fix that because, you know, the driver said that particular component is starting to fail, or it's got a crack in it, or it's bent, or it doesn't work, you know.
So Doug, what would you do if the driver did a pre-start and the fire extinguisher was out of date, or when they picked it up, it looked, when they shook it, it didn't feel good?
Yep,
what would
absolutely.
You recommend?
Yep, call the breakdown phone, say, hey, fire extinguisher US. Simple as that. Replacement, got a cage of them out there, all ready to go.
Cool.
But all these components have got to work. Like your lane departure, if you have a look at this truck, like just about every single one of them, you find that it's been taped over and it's been switched off. Because they reckon it's annoying. Sorry, that's not lane departure, that's blind spot for weapons there.
Yep.
But they tape over for your other camera up here, which does your lane change, yeah. I mean, there's stuff that people, if they're just a driver, let that radar drive, then they can't physically see it. They can't look at that radar and see whether it's working or not. You know what I mean? So it's unrealistic on some stuff to expect that it's have amazing mechanical knowledge.
They can only report on what they see, on their skill set.
And a part of that, though, is us giving them the ideas and the knowledge of what to look for, you know, what's important, all that sort of stuff, you know. Like you wouldn't expect your driver to know that damage to that bonnet is caused because the two halves of the quarter guard is poorly aligned, and it's not a big job to realign it, but that's something that's way outside your average driver's wheelhouse. 124, that's it's not a very old quarter guard on there.
And be a cab driver as well.
Yeah.
Some of the things like this, like a little bit of damage to the step.
Yep, bit of cow damage, I reckon,
Yeah.
by the look of that. Yep, and that's something that, you know, you'd hope has been recorded at some stage. But yeah, all this sort of stuff, you know, you're looking to see that, you know, there's nothing too bodged up, you know, there's nothing leaking. You know, they're all the things that we want to see. Yeah, very important. And obviously in a full pre-start, we're going to drop the bull bar, we're going to raise the bonnet, we're going to have a look at the belts and the pulleys and the idlers and make sure that, you know, everything's as it should be. Have a look at the Horton fan bearing, have a look at the sight glass to see what the coolant level is, and obviously pull the dipstick out. and have a look. And a good thing to do also is make sure they pull the dipstick out for the power steering, because it only has to run low for a bit, it'll run very high. Alright, well let's keep wandering along. So obviously, yeah, not much to see here. If there's no leaks, you know, or nothing running ridiculously hot, there's sort of not much to see, is there? But in terms of your walk around, yeah, some of the stuff that we're looking for is, you know, make sure all your auto greases are greasy. You know, and there should be a fair bit of fat, you know, coming out of that ball race. There's a nice amount coming out of there, and that's how we determine if they're working or not. Yeah, tyres. I mean, the tyres here are very good. Security of the fifth wheel, not a big problem for what we do, because the fitters are involved in any changing of trailers. But still, you want people to do, you know, as a part of their walk around, you want them to be aware of that. You know, just in case something funky's happened where the fitters were going to change the trailer and they've got that pulled out and they've forgot to lock it back in. You want to make sure that that's secure. Yeah. Landing legs, you know, we want to make sure that they've got the feet on them, like that has, and that they work properly. Not saying that you physically test them. Spare tyre racks, you know, you got to make sure you got one trailer tyre, one drive tyre for these CCs. Obviously, once you get it done, it doesn't matter because all the rims are the same.
And how would the drivers know they're not experienced? How would they know what a drive tyre and a trailer one?
The trailer tyre pattern would have the small rim in it, but as it turns out, these are both drive runouts, so it's a bit more tricky. But it's a hole in the middle, obviously. That one will be a 335mm PCD, and the other side one will be 285. So yeah, looking at that, looking at the tyres, all look good. You know, things like suspension. And what we're looking for there is like, you know, rocker boxes. Is there any obvious rubber hanging out anywhere? We don't expect them to know, you know, what the difference between a worn rocker box. But if there's something as obvious as a guts of rubber hanging out, then we want to know about it. You know, all that sort of stuff.
We're all all that in the case to make sure they're all on there as well.
Absolutely, yep. And the other thing we're looking for in this process is we want to make sure that everything is on here that's supposed to be on here is connected. So say for example your secondary door switches, we don't want them to understand particularly how they work or anything else. We just want to make sure that if that's been bypassed, they tell someone. Right? So that's a cardinal decision. If that's been bypassed, it'll be immediate termination for the people involved. So yeah, that's all the stuff that we're looking at, and that pretty much runs the same from trailer to trailer. But we're looking for physical damage too. You know, like where there's a big ding taken out of a drawbar, for example, which there's not, and you know that it's been taken. Yeah, exactly. And we want people to remember that, you know, one driver said the other day, all your tyres are stuffed, mate. And I said, you know that the legal limit is 1.5mm, which ain't much. So those tyres are very weak. Break the bin out there.
Sorry, Doug, could you repeat that bit?
No, so these things like these chassis rubbers, for example, that's a good example of something that has to be monitored in every pre-start. So if that chassis rubber falls out and this bing bangs up and down steel on steel, you probably do 2 or 3 loads, and usually what it does, it'll break here in the pivot, or it'll split them in the corner and here, because it's just smashing it steel on steel. So that's all the stuff that we want them to spot. We want them to keep an eye on things like here, like your secondary pin keepers, right? That was a requirement from MRL years and years ago, and we've all stuck to it because it's a good thing.
What was it? Why'd they require it?
Because a few people, so all that holds that pin in is that nut, right? And in some instances, that nut came off or the stud broke, and the pin came out. And they pulled up one of Fusion's, one of the very first super quads that was converted from a normal quad, And because in here it's like a pillow block setup where the pin takes the weight, but you can imagine the way that works, it sits like that over the top of it. So it actually carries a lot of the weight. But when they pulled him up to have a look, the pin out of one side was missing. So MRL were that excited, they said, okay, from now on, you've got to have secondary keepers. And we went to Bruce, everyone else was welding bits of shit on their trailers left, right and centre. We went to Bruce Rock and said, what can you do? So for $2.50, they laser cut all these little jiggers and we just weld them on. And that worked pretty good.
What causes the gooseneck to be dented?
Sorry, mate?
What happens when the gooseneck's been, what's that cause? Like a couple of dents on the gooseneck?
Yeah, it can be turning too short.
Yeah.
Quite frequently turning too short. We might have a look at the next one's usually where the action is.
Yeah.
Not always. But yeah, no, you normally, if you're having a good look around here, so see here, see this damage here and here? That's where they've turned too short. And it's bitten into the chassis. And sometimes it's severe enough that it will actually bend the top flange in the trailer. And yes, I mean, and that's bad enough. It doesn't look very recent, that damage, but tow wires don't last that long. So it's happened in the last couple 100,000 cars. But really good at walking around, make sure everything's plugged in and turned on and all that sort of stuff.
Obviously got electrical connectors, hydraulic connectors,
Yep.
or connections, and pneumatic connections.
And while we're walking around, you know, important that things like obviously all the lights work, all the reflectors are in place, your number plates are readable. That's actually now an $1,100 fine on the driver if you have a number plate that's not and that can be because it's got mud on it. It can be because someone's run the pressure cleaner on it too close. But yeah, it's $1,100 fine, 10 mil. And they've sprung a few on recently just to show us who's boss. Oh yeah, same thing. You got to make sure your signs are intact and clean enough to be read easily. Yeah, really important. Things like these do not overtake chevrons. You know, so each trailer's got it. Bizarrely, the rear 3 trailers have to have that. The front one doesn't. Why? Well, someone at the Department of Transport probably knows. I don't, but that is the law. So really important. The way the rules go is if it's fitted on here, it has to work. Right? So you only need one light on here by law, but if there's 2 fitted, they've both got to work.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. Yeah, so
Can you explain the clearance lights and why some are red and why some are green?
so yeah, these clearance lights here. So you have red and amber in there. This is coming from someone that's colourblind, right? But so you have red inside and you have amber, so that you know which one's facing forward. So, yeah, say for example, you know, you saw a truck parked on the side of the road, you immediately know by which way the lights were as to what way it's facing and what's going on. So the EBS lights, right? So really important, even though it's a bit hard to read, really important that people, you know, I've had to drive over to the RTO on multiple occasions and explain to the scalies, you know, hey, if you just read that little tag, everything would be clear. Yeah? Because quite commonly, when you come to a stop, at least one of the lights will be red. And that's just because, so in 2 of these axles, there are what they call pulse rings that tell the EBS system how fast the wheels are going. And when you've got so many of them and you come to a stop after a tight cornering manoeuvre, it just confuses the poor little brain of the EBS computer. And when you get going again, so if you started this from here, say 2 of your 4 lights were red, you drove it around the corner and you parked it right back here in exactly the same spot, there'd be a chance that all be green, there'd be a chance that all be red, or there'd be a chance you'd have 2 of each. You know? And so that's why it says on here that the only way that you can make sure that they're working correctly is they have to be observed at more than 40 kilometres an hour. So after I gave the Charlies a tune up about that, we got a yellow sticker, and here what it said on the top, observed at more than 40 kilometres an hour. You say it looks pretty funny, and I just... Yeah. So yeah, all that stuff we're looking on, you know, so, you know, that ram's getting plenty of grease, you know, that sort of problem. there's a bit fallen here on the guard, you'd almost say that's borderline or a little bit too much. Now, if that was a hydraulic leak, what we'd be looking at is, are you getting the occasional spot on here, or is it actually hitting the ground? When it's hitting the ground, you've got a problem. When it's on the vehicle, you can usually get away with that. But yeah, so those rubber things are really important. Manual controls for the lid and for the body. Right? A lot of people have been driving side tippers for years and they've never had to manually tip ever in their life. So it's something that we probably should incorporate into training, where we actually get them out there and go, this is how you open the lids manually, this is how you tip the body manually. You can really only tip manually at Utah, because if you paddock dump it out at A2 or on site, you'll just bog it. You know,
It's on the product
and we're not allowed to be lifting it and walking along at the same time, or not if anyone's looking at. So very important that we don't do that. But we could, all the controls and all the functions and all that stuff, it's really important that people understand how they work. So disc brakes, everything that's set in the prime mover is disc brakes, right? And that's when we're all BPW axles here, but there's still 3 different styles of calipers. Some are one piston, some are twin piston, but they're all pretty much the same, right? So one of the most common things you get in terms of faults is people ring up and say, oh, I've got a hot brake, right? And I know you probably cover this in training. So you say, okay, where are you measuring it? Oh yeah, look, I'm measuring it here. I've got my thing down here, Tom, and I'm measuring it here, and it says that it's 80. And you go, yeah, that's no good. What are the rest of them? And they go, oh, they're all 42. Oh, that's bloody hot. Hey, can you go around the other side and can you take the temperature of the actual rotor, the disc? And sometimes they'll go, oh yeah, that says it's 120. So you'd know then that it's dissipating from the rotor into the hub, and you've probably got an issue where you've got a brake drag. Whereas if they said, oh, the hub's at 80 and the disc's at 40, you go, oh, well, you've got a bearing issue. Not always 100%, but that's a really good indication, you know? And that just gives us that info of how big a drama it's going to be. Like, are we going to come out and bloody back the brake off and it'll be fine, or are we going to come out and chain it up with this bearing stuff? Right, so all that stuff's pretty important. And good to just cast their eye over all this stuff and make sure that, you know, all the hoses are plugged in and all that sort of stuff, you know? And as always, if in doubt, you know, bring the workshop. Not my number after hours, hopefully. After saying all that, so we don't need to plug that in because, so you would for the front one, but as you go back each time, if you had a look at the next one, it's probably got 4 hoses disconnected because the slack fitter who connected up realises that they don't do anything as you go back. Right, what's next?
Bin checks, do we do bin checks on the way around?
I mean, we just do integrity checks, but it's really important to get them in the habit of nice and empty, right? Because we have had plenty of stuff ups of people going to site with the dog loaded, is one of the most common ones. But we've had them where they've rung up and said, I'm going over the Roy Hill overpass. Gee, there's trucks gutless. And you go, is it really, mate? Yeah. How about you pull up and make sure you're not loaded? Well, I've got me, I am still loaded. Yeah, you're right. How did it go over the BHP overpass and the Fortescue overpass? Was it a bit slow there? Yeah, no, it was too. But you waited till you got another 15 k's out the road before you told us. Now, a simple, well, they're doing a tyre test. Yeah, well, they're fueling up at shift change. Just pretty straightforward that you do. Yeah, really important thing.
Doug, what's the ruling on the tyre test?
As in?
Because I get arguments with them saying, do the tyre test.
As in tap?
Yeah.
Or strike, as they say?
Yeah, they say, do they do it at the port and they'll be all right in because they're doing it at the port and then they're not doing it on the pre-start after that.
So they need to do it a minimum of twice per shift.
Right, okay.
Yep. And it's a bit like the bearing temp checks. You know, they say one empty, one loaded. There's not much point doing a bearing temp check empty to me. It's just a waste of time. But look, the way they run it at the moment is one loader, one empty. As long as they've got 2 per shift, a minimum of, and one of them is loaded, that's acceptable. The tyre test look, you know, an experienced truckie, if he's pulling up for a 20-minute break, every single time he pulls up for that break, he needs to check all the tyres. Right? Even if he's already done his 2 temp checks for the day, he still needs to check the tyres, because this is the critical part. You know, there's what, 110 wheels and tyres on here, and each one is about $760 by the time you have the rim and the tyre replacement value. So, you know, if you have a double banger, for example, because I've had a flat in the inside, you didn't deal with it, you know, it's about a $1,500 operation. Not to mention it, you know, usually when you blow that one remaining, it blows, you know, big time, and you'll end up losing the guard and the mud guard and all the, you know, the wiring and all the mess that goes with it. So yeah, that's pretty remarkable. Yeah, that tyre's not very handy. Inside one. That probably doesn't pass muster. Yeah, good spot though. Yeah, good spot though, because in the shade sort of thing. But yeah, and looking for things like, you know, if you see like a wheel nut and you can see where the rim's been chattering on the stud, you know that something loose. Done that very often because we're pretty good at all that sort of security. But yeah, really pretty good.
So that's a pre-start?
Yep, that's a sort of walk around pre-start, but obviously that's on the assumption that you've drifted the bottom and you've done all that part of it.
Okay, so the only parts that we didn't do because of safety
Yep.
is the bonnet roll,
Yep,
but we're all experienced enough to know the bonnet roll.
absolutely, yep.
Okay.
And there's procedure for that if we want to refer to it.